here's Brody Brazil.
So by the time I publish this video, we'll be about a day and a half away from Major League Baseball's trade deadline that occurs on Tuesday, 3 p.m. California time. As we approach this, it's so critical for the Giants, just like the entire last winter was. It feels like this deadline is almost a dilemma. There's not an obvious path here, but there's also kind of a small window of opportunity, things they can do to try and really nail this deadline. It doesn't seem like standing pat, as in doing nothing, is part of that option. They have to do something, but what will they do? How much will they do? Will Blake Snell be a part of that? All of a sudden, he's entered himself into the success and therefore trade potential conversation. How exactly do they navigate this? We're going to talk about it here in this video. The first thing I want to say, though, about this entire season so far in more than 100 games, a theme of this Giants season is lacking in the ROI department. I'm not a business person, but I do understand ROI, return on investment. And the large investments that they went out and made this past offseason to acquire Blake Snell and Matt Chapman and Jorge Soler and Jung-Hoo Lee and Jordan Hicks, it's not to say that this list of individuals, this is not a bust list. It's not to say that everybody here has failed to provide what the team was expecting or hoping for. That's not it necessarily at all. But it is to say here, as you look at this list, I suppose Jordan Hicks and Matt Chapman are at the top of delivering on what the team was hoping for. And even then, there are some caveats, there are some asterisks to go along with what they've done so far this season, just top to bottom. Obviously, with Blake Snell, missed a lot of time, missed basically the first half of this season. Now he's back. Now he's striking out a ton of batters, a ton of swing and miss in that last brilliant performance against the Rockies. And it could propel this team into a playoff spot. Like, he could perform his best when it matters most and make a huge difference in April, May, and June. It'll all be forgotten. Missing spring training. People may not remember that if he comes through in the clutch. But I'm just saying, on the entirety of the season, it's been a really rough one for Blake Snell. I think Matt Chapman has provided all the things you may expect defensively, and from a veteran standpoint and a leadership standpoint, the bat has just been in and out and here and there. For Jorge Soler, they looked at him as somebody to maybe be the first 30 home run hitter for the Giants since Barry Bonds. We know that pace is certainly not going to bring him to 30 total. Yeah, he found some success in the leadoff spot, but I don't really think that's really the end game or goal for Soler or the Giants in using him optimally. What can you say about Jung-Hoo Lee? He was off to a good start. Hitting the baseball consistently, getting on base consistently, not a lot of strikeouts, a lot of contact. He was learning the outfield in a much better way until he got hurt. Until he crashed into the wall, he needed surgery, he's out for the rest of the season. That one's just a disappointment, right? It's the cost of business almost. It has less to do with his performance, more the fact that he's just not available this entire season. And let me just quickly say, as we start to think about this season in reverse, losing Jung-Hoo Lee, how they did, when they did, and what he was doing for the team, setting the table at the top of the lineup, that makes more of a difference, I think, than people have realized thus far. And then you have Jordan Hicks, who for a certain time was the best starter in the rotation. Problem is, once he starts to get around the triple-digit mark of innings pitched this year, and the arm just isn't what it was to start, and we kind of had that fear and concern that a bullpen pitcher transitioned into a starter may have this issue once he kind of hits a wall at a certain innings mark. Well, that happened. And so now he's pitching out of the bullpen, which is still valuable. The bullpen does need some help too, but it just hasn't panned out maybe like the Giants had expected. So the return on investments, that's kind of a theme for this season. I'm not blaming those names or individuals, but that has been part of where they're at this year. They've stayed sub 500 for a majority of the time. In fact, the last time they had a winning record, they were 2 over 500 back in late May. We're almost in August. It's been a while. But on the flip side, the season low for the Giants was only 6 games under 500. And that was just, last week or so, right before the Rockies sweep. So my point is here about staying 2 over to 6 under the entire time. That's only an 8-game swing for literally the entire season. Like, they've been consistently vanilla. They've been consistently meh. They weren't way ahead of 500. They're not way behind 500. They're just kind of meddling in, usually below 500, but maybe a little bit above 500. They just, and I'll get to this in a second, they just have yet to find that winning identity. Like, how does this team win games? What is their calling card? What's the formula for a Giants win? And is it repeatable? Is it sustainable? More on that in just a second. And again, to try and put some more things to this season, they've only been shut out twice. So the offense, it's weird. It's there, but it's just not there enough usually. 1 run, 2 runs, sometimes 3. That's not consistently enough to for sure get you a win. They've had 26 blown leads, but to be fair, I think they've also had 23 or 24 comeback wins this season. 9 of their victories have come at home in walk-off fashion. And it is worth pointing out here that as we approach this trade deadline, right, at the end of July into August, their schedule is about to get much easier for about a 2-week span. So the whole breaking through 2 over 500 thing, and getting 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 games over and maybe getting closer to a playoff position, that could happen alone, even if they make no moves, just because the schedule is about to get easier. So long as the Giants get the results, the schedule is going to cooperate in the next couple weeks. So that is built in at the same time here as we approach the trade deadline. And I guess if you just punch your ticket into the playoffs, like, you earn yourself a shot at the second season. Look at the Diamondbacks last year. Who thought for them going in that they would even make it all the way to the World Series? But the problem with the Giants is, so far in this regular season, like I said, there is not a win identity. A formula of a starter that's going to give you something certain, the bats that are going to produce a certain amount of runs, a team that maybe manufactures some runs, steals some bases. They obviously haven't done that regularly all season. Like, what is the calling card of the Giants this year to win baseball games? And crazy enough, they don't have that, but they're still shooting for that 3rd wild card spot, or maybe even the 2nd one in the National League. Problem is, at this juncture, there's like 7 or 8 teams fighting for that 2nd and 3rd wild card, in addition to all the teams that don't have it that are trying to fight for it. It is a very busy playoff competition in the National League. I looked at the American League for the wild card. It's not so much like that, but the National League is just so crowded. It is just, the parity is so tremendous in the National League that you don't have a lot of separation between 5, 6, and 7 teams all fighting for wild card spots. That established, the stats tell us that the Giants only have about a 16% chance of somehow, some way, making the 2024 playoffs. And if that's what this trade deadline is all about, like doing something to punch your ticket, then that's interesting. That's a fine qualification. If you're going to judge this trade deadline eventually on did you make the playoffs or not, then I feel like you have to do something here. I don't know that standing pat is going to necessarily get them closer to the standings of where they want to be. Standing pat feels bad. It feels dangerous. Now, I'm the same person who was recommending maybe going out there and signing a Blake Snell and signing a Matt Chapman. And I really liked Jung-Hoo Lee. When they did that, it was obviously not on my radar, but I really like that. And like I said, all of those things didn't necessarily work out. So I can't say that my track record here has been spot on in seeing for sure results and then getting them. But I'm just saying here right now that doing nothing is almost maybe counteractive to what the Giants are hoping for. Because with a trade deadline, you're either trying to improve right now, like make sure you make the playoffs or give yourself a really good chance for it, or sell some players off for this season, try and make things better next season. So improve now or get better later, or if you do nothing, what are you doing? Right? Because you're not doing either one of those two things. And also if you do nothing, and I'm not trying to trade Blake Snell, although his value must be skyrocketing right now. I'm not trying to move Matt Chapman, and Robbie Ray has just got started in San Francisco, but those players have opt-outs in their contracts. Now, those are individual situations. Maybe Snell, if the way he's pitching, if that trend continues, maybe he would exercise that opt-out. I don't think Matt Chapman's going to do that, and it's way too early to understand what Robbie Ray is capable of coming back from the injury. The point is, you risk opt-outs if you keep those players and then those players leave you and you get nothing out of them. So I feel like it's, although teams can do this and have done this successfully, of just say, hey, calm things down. We like our group. We're going to stick with our group. They have done this before. I just feel like for the Giants, instinctually, maybe it's a little bit of a bad message and a signal to both the inside, like the players on the inside, but also the fans on the outside. Doing nothing feels, like I said, counterproductive here. One area that could be improved is the bullpen. Obviously, this team scoring, a lot of 2s and 3s. They're averaging, I want to say, since the All-Star break, about 2.5 runs a game. They need help scoring runs more consistently, more often, and just getting to higher crooked numbers. But they also need to know that their bullpen is going to be solid. Their rotation has been bolstered. Yeah, Hicks is now out there in the bullpen, but they also need a bullpen that can hold leads and also chew up some innings. Now, I only think this is going to be an issue until the regular season concludes. If they get to the playoffs, remember, it's a 3-man rotation. Snell, Webb, and Ray as your 3-man pitching rotation in some order, whatever order you want. Like, think about that for a second. You can move Birdsong out into the bullpen, Harrison out into the bullpen. Obviously, Hicks is already out there in the bullpen. Like, you get very interesting, very fast pitching-wise. So this is not a regular season bullpen. This is not a playoff bullpen problem. This is a regular season bullpen problem just to get to the playoffs. Problem is, can you get to the playoffs with this bullpen and how taxed they are? And lastly here, it does kind of feel a little bit like hot seat time. It felt like going into this year and the acquisitions and the spending, it felt like this year was the splash. And this year was the audition to make it different, get it right. And so it brings me to maybe a front office that's thinking, well, if this is our audition and we're only getting this one chance, are we present focused? Like, are we trying to fix this team up? Are we trying to make some moves here in the final 36 hours of the deadline? Or are we still future focused? Like, you know what? Here's an option to make the team better next year and beyond. But are they thinking about that right now because they're trying to salvage this season still? And I say salvage, they're not that far away from the playoffs, and there is still multiple months worth of baseball in the regular season to be played to gain only a small distance at this point, only a handful of games to get into a playoff spot. There's just a lot of competition for it. There's also this, the Giants are not stuck with impossible puzzle pieces of players if they don't want to be. Like, they can find a home for Blake Snell. If they really wanted, they rehabbed Robbie Ray, and they would start him, twice or once actually, and then trade him. That would be interesting. But my point is, they have players that they could move and they could get something in return for. I don't know how much, or if it's what they're hoping for, or the situation of that, and that's obviously part of the equation. But my point is, there's a lot of teams in a lot of occasions that want to change their team. Problem is, nobody wants to take their players. I think the Giants have some players that are definitely assets and would be to other clubs. So in total, though, as we look at this team, they're better positioned, I think, than they were last year at this time, maybe even 2 years ago at this time. They're closer to their goals. The problem is they're still not there yet. And there's not a lot of room for gray area here for the orange and black. You're either there and you're challenging for a playoff spot, or you're off in the distance and you're not going to challenge for it and you have no chance at the second season. You're one or the other, right? And at this point, the Giants are kind of on the outside still looking in, or, instead of being right there on the cusp of it, they really, again, have barely been a winning record team all season long. So is this their push? Is it about to come? That's what makes this deadline a dilemma. There's no for sure thing, I think, that everybody can agree on. And yeah, like I said here, Blake Snell is going to be the centerpiece of that. The attention's all on him. But I don't know that there's one script here that if they follow it, everything's going to be just fine. There's like a million different ways to go. Like I said, doing something feels right. Doing nothing feels like it's just not going to be enough. But keep that schedule in mind across the next couple weeks. Things should get better inherently no matter what. You've made it here to the end of this video. You know I really appreciate that. Thumbs up down below. That'll greatly help me, this video, and this channel. I would like that, but I would love if right now you go down there and hit that subscribe button. That way I definitely get to see you back here next time.